Here are cars with pop-up headlights you can buy for cheap. So here is 20 of the most affordable ones, starting with the cheapest. The Ford Probe. The Probe is based on the platform of the Mazda MX-6. They share some components, so the car is relatively robust. Also, it does come as a turbo and a V6. The turbo makes 147 horsepower, the V6 160. So it's not crazy quick, but it does look very nice. Also, it comes with some very interesting interior options, like a full red leather interior or a blue one, and so on. An interesting fact about this car, if you didn't know, Ford wanted to replace the Mustang with the Probe, but because it's front-wheel drive, it failed. Next one, the Nissan Pulsar NX Sportsback. Dude, that's probably the quirkiest car on the list. You can either get it as a coupe or the sportsback version with this big ass glass panel on the back, which basically makes it a two-door wagon, and also you can get it as a Targa with a filler in the middle. It looks so good. Now, talking about power, it's nothing special. It makes either 75, 90 horsepower or, for the turbo version, 115. So it's not gonna get you there fast, but it's gonna get you there stylish. Curious fact about the car, this is the first vehicle for the Japanese market where the mirrors were not mounted on the front fenders, but rather on the doors. Who knew? And moving to the Mazda 323F. Light and not very powerful. This one was unfortunately never sold in the US, but it's still an interesting choice for us Europeans here. It's one of the cheapest cars on the list. So, as I told you, it's light. It weighs around 1100 kilos, and that's less than 2400 pounds. It comes with 84, 103 or 128 horsepower for the GT version, but these ones are quite rare. It's curious that for the facelift, which doesn't have the pop-up headlights anymore, was a V6 version as well, and an 1100 pound chassis. It needs some love, but it can definitely become the star of the Sunday gas station gathering. The Toyota Celica, both 4th and 5th generations. Now, these ones can be found very cheap, basically everywhere. It's got a very Japanese design, and there's about 1 million different versions and engines. There is a very peculiar fact about this car. As you know, the Celicas came both as a coupe and convertible, but from factory they only came as a coupe. Then, Toyota shipped them to the US, a company in the US converted them to convertibles, and shipped them back to Japan where they were sold. So strange. And now for a personal favorite of mine, the Honda Prelude 3rd and 4th generation. They are very similar, but if you can, get one of the 4th generation, because it got independent suspension and some other quirks and features that makes it quite a lot better. It comes either with a 109 horsepower engine or a 140 horsepower engine, as well as 160, but only for the Japanese market, unfortunately. And it's exceptionally beautiful. Now, a cool fact about this car, this is the first vehicle to come with 4-wheel steering. Actually, some people might tell you that this was the R32, which made it just a few months earlier, but the R32's 4-wheel steering was electronical and it only worked at high-speed corners, where the Prelude steering was mechanical and it worked in both low speed and high-speed corners. And now, moving from Honda to Porsche, with the Porsche 924. For some reason, the US market hasn't grown to love them yet, so you can still get them pretty cheap. Take advantage of that. The story of this car is interesting. It was a joint venture between VW and Porsche, and it was supposed to come out under the VW badge, but they pulled out last seconds and came out with the Scirocco instead. And Porsche was like, alright then, we're gonna have it. And that's how the 924 became the first front-engine Porsche. It came with a 2-liter engine making 125 horsepower, or a 2.5-liter making 160, as well as the turbo version making 177 horsepower. It also got a really cool coupe, which kind of looked like a cat litter box coupe, if you ask me. And since we're on the Porsche wave, let's throw in the 944, and you know what? The 928 as well. About the 944, that's my short-term dream car, if I can put it this way. It looks amazing, it's supposed to drive amazing, it's reliable. Curious fact about the 944? This was the best-selling Porsche in the US for the 80s.
Although it has been known occasion to snack on Corvettes.
And just real fast about the 928, I did find some questionable ones under 10 grand. The car does come with a V8 if you want it to. And it's got one of the most interesting pop-up headlights design I've ever seen, even though I'm not really a fan of it. But the chicken was still warm, so this does give it some legendary status. Moving to Sweden for the Volvo 480. This one was unfortunately never sold in the US. It got a questionable design. I feel like if a car had Down syndrome, this would have been it. still kind of cool though. Comes either with a 95, 110 horsepower, or for the turbo version, 125 horsepower engine. And an interesting fact, that's the first Volvo to come with front-wheel drive and the only one with pop-up headlights. And now, the third and fourth generation Pontiac Firebird. Looks like for every Swedish turbo hatchback there's about 5 American V8s. The third generation is cooler in my opinion, so that's the one to get. So it was made during the oil crisis in the US, so the engines were quite small, starting with the 2.5 liter 4-cylinder making only 90 horsepower. Then there was a V6 making 135 horsepower and a V8 starting from 145 horsepower with the most powerful version making 235. So it's nothing special. But this is the most powerful car on the list so far. Also, a strange fact, about 70% of the Firebirds sold were with an automatic transmission. So theoretically, you can get a 4-cylinder automatic Firebird. But if you do, you're probably related to the Volvo 480. And there was an interesting design option for the Firebird. You could get it with a notchback design, just like a Fiero. And speaking of the Fiero, that's our next car. And I don't know why everybody hates on it. It's such a cool car. It's mid-engined, it's got pop-up headlights, it's got speakers in the headrests. As far as I can actually tell, this is the first car in the world to have speakers in the headrest. And also, it was an Indianapolis 500 space car in 1984. Oh, and the Firebird was one too, by the way. And talking about mid-engine cars, next one is the Fiat X1/9. Curious fact, the body of the car was designed by Pininfarina, which designed many Maseratis and Ferraris, and the engine was designed by an ex-Ferrari engineer. Now you could find some between 5 and 10 grand, or even under 5 grand if you want a badly maintained Italian car that's 50 years old. You got two engine options, a 1.3 liter 75 horsepower or a 1.5 liter making 86 horsepower. But the car is incredibly light in limbo, so that was pretty much enough for the times. I feel like for what you get, the price isn't that steep. It looks very beautiful with this wedge-shaped design. It's basically a mini Ferrari Testarossa. Now, speaking of wedge shapes, the next one is the Triumph TR7, a British car for the American roads. And yeah, this car was so popular in the US that the UK launch kept getting delayed and delayed. It's very light, it's fun to drive with the engine pushing the rear wheels, and it made a somewhat alright power. There was a 2-liter engine making 90 horsepower, or a V8 making 145 or 155 horsepower for the EU market. The cheapest drivable examples in the US are about 1700 bucks, with a perfect example for about 7 grand. They're not that expensive just because they sold so many of them. An interesting fact, the car was nicknamed the shape of things to come because of its futuristic wedge-shaped design. And it was supposed to be only a convertible, but there were talks in the US about regulations of banning convertibles just because they didn't meet some safety regulations about rollover or something, I don't know. And now, moving from a car that had immaculate success to a car that kind of flopped. The Buick Reatta. And this car had the first touchscreen ever in 1988. Which makes it incredibly cool. It drives as you'd imagine a 40-year-old computer to run League of Legends, but that's not why you buy this car. You buy it because of the pop-up headlights and the touchscreen. Starts at around 1500 bucks with drivable examples for 3.5k and all the way up to 12k if you want to spend that much money on a touchscreen. And staying in America for the Corvette C4. And for me it's unbelievable that in the US you can still get cars like this for under 5k. Yeah, they won't be perfect, they'll have some problems, a lot of rust, and they'll be beaten down and not taken care of, but they'll have so much character, there's just something in cars like this. And in Europe, they're 2-3 times more expensive. So enjoy while you're a kid, America. And there is an interesting fact about the ZR1. For about 11 years, it held the record for the fastest average speed in 5,000 miles at 173 miles per hour, beaten by a Le Mans car. And now we're gonna talk about 4 cars in one, the Mitsubishi Starion or the Chevrolet Plymouth Dodge Conquest. This was the last rear-wheel drive Mitsubishi. And it is by far the cheapest sort of JDM rear-wheel drive car. Starts at around 5k with mint condition for about $12,000. and it came only as a turbo. There was a non-turbo version, but only in Japan. Interesting fact is that Mitsubishi starts developing a Group B version for the car, but unfortunately the whole Group B got scrapped before they could finish. Which in our case is a good thing, because that's why we can get them for so cheap. Oh, and also it did win a Group A rally. And now talking about joint ventures between Mitsubishi and some American brands, we've got the 3rd generation Mitsubishi Eclipse, the Plymouth Laser or the Eagle Talon. And you can own a car that's called the Laser or the Eagle. That's so cool! And I did find a drivable example with turbo for 3,500 bucks. And they're quite hard to find in Europe or never sold in the UK. The base engine made 93 horsepower, then there was a 2-liter making 150, and the turbo version made 193. Also, an interesting fact, it had a 4-wheel drive version, which is the same 4-wheel drive system used later in the first Lancer Evo. And now, talking about 4-wheel drive, next car is the Subaru XT. Yet another wedge shape. Those ones are hard to find, especially for low price, but I did find one sold on Bring the Trailer for about 6k and one on Cars and Bids, again for 6.5, with the base version making 97 horsepower and the turbo making from 135 to 165 horsepower. And last but not least, there are a few more, which are way too rare to include, but still cool. We've got the Mazda 99 2nd generation, a Japanese cool from the late 70s with rear-wheel drive. The Isuzu Piazza, an Italian-designed Japanese car with turbo and 4-wheel drive. We've all heard of the S13s or 14s or 15s, but what about the S12? Nobody talks about this one. And you can still get the Nissan S12 for under 10k if you're lucky. Now last and probably least, the Honda Quint. This was a predecessor to the Integra, but it had 4 doors, it wasn't as fun to drive or as powerful, and right now they're ridiculously expensive for what they are. But they do come with pop-up headlights. So, which one would I like to get? Can I try each one for a month? My top 3s are probably the 944 first, the Honda Prelude and the Starion number 3. But what about you guys? And also, are there any cars I've forgotten? Let me know. Cheers!